All right, welcome back. This is the Coach Mark Gottfried Show, and I've had some phenomenal guests, but boy, am I excited today because I've got a guy that I have respected for so long and so many years, and he's done an unbelievable job. He's one of the top coaches in all of college basketball, and he's doing, in my view, he's doing miracles at Ole Miss. He's doing a great job. So, Chris Beard, man, thank you. Thank you for joining, and we're going to have a little bit of fun, but thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thank you, Coach. I've been looking forward to this.
You know, Chris, just to start off with, I like to dive into this because, you know, a lot of coaches that coach, you know, in the SEC and the ACC and the Big Ten, they've kind of had a conventional path. You know, they become a GA, they work a couple of years, then they're assistant, then they get a head job. And you've done such an amazing job because you had a lot of stops along the way that, you know, if you look back, a lot of coaches really haven't had some of the places that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't know where they are on the map. But it helped you and developed you as a coach to have a lot of stops and learning along the way. But just talk a little bit about your path to get to where you are and to have the success that you've had.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Actually, early in my career, I didn't think much about it at all. You know, I was just trying to get the next recruit, win the next game, try to do a good job as an assistant. But certainly in recent years, I've probably thought about it more than anything. When we won the conference championship at Little Rock and we got the NCAA tournament bid, in the post-game interview, the announcer, he asked me, hey, anything special to say to all those junior college and Division II coaches out there? And that was the first time it kind of hit me. And now I've really kind of grown proud of my journey. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think that our program does represent a lot of people out there. I've said many times, and I really believe it, some of the best coaches I ever competed against were in junior college and Division II. So everybody's got a different path in this deal, but I wouldn't trade mine for anything.
You know, Chris, I can remember when I was at UCLA and I was working for Jim Herrick, and he and I were talking one night, and he goes, Mark, because he was 9 years. A lot of people forget he was 9 years at Morningside High School in Inglewood. But I remember him telling me, he said, Mark, that's where I learned how to coach. And it really resonated with me where, he was able to coach, and you may have felt some of this, and I would love your opinion, but you're coaching where all of America's not watching, and you can make some mistakes. You can learn, you can develop, you can change your philosophy, and it really, for Jim, I think at those 9 years, it really resonated as far as that's kind of where he learned how to coach and how he wanted to coach. Would you relate with that a little bit for some of the places you started off and when you were early and you were younger as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. I would agree with that 100%. It's kind of like we always tell the players, like player development's this big thing in recruiting and our game. But I always tell the players, like, it's hard to develop if you can't play in the game. And I know one of our big spills here at Ole Miss is we try to recruit young guys and get them on the floor early. I think it's the same as coaches. I think there's just something about, having the ability to coach your team, to call a timeout, to run a practice. True story, some of the most talented teams I ever coached were my first two junior college teams. And to this day, we're going on 20, 25 years now. When I see those players, I always pretty much apologize to them. Because I really think that if I would have known then what I knew now, I really think we probably could have won 4 or 5 more games. And I mean that. I always apologize to those guys. Like, I'm sorry I was so young and made all those mistakes. But no doubt about it. I wouldn't trade my path for anything. All those years coaching small college, being able to kind of learn on the fly, I think, made me the coach I am today.
Would you agree that, like with Jim and the other, on the other hand too, where I remember him telling me, he said, Mark, I made so many mistakes. And so when I got to Murray State, even though Murray State was for the mid-major level, it was, it was a pretty prominent school. They had won, they had been in the tournament, but I still felt like I could coach. If I go back even to Murray State, just like you, and I go, God, I learned how to hire coaches. I had to fire one guy, which it was hard for me. It was like so hard to do, mistakes in recruiting or, all the things you got to deal with. That's kind of where I learned it, but I wasn't getting criticized by the national media. Nobody was nobody was really watching. Our local community obviously was, but would you agree with some of that as well, as far as just growing as a coach when you were younger?
Hey, absolutely. It's like we tell our players, we watch film with our guys every day after practice or games. And I tell the players all the time, like, if you took a test that had 10 questions, then you had a chance to redo the test. If you got 7 of them right and 3 of them wrong, would you spend most of your time looking at the 7 you got right? Or would you spend all your time in those 3 you got to improve? And the players always kind of understand that. It's a common sense conversation. I think the same's true with coaching. We were doing a lot of right things back in those days too. Our guys played hard. We played the right way. We took good shots. But all the things that we probably weren't doing as good a job in those days, that's where we've improved over the years. So I know me, when we self-reflect after every practice, every game, we spend the majority of the time, in the things that we could have done better.
Chris, I have always for years, and for me, really, I remember meeting you. You and I talked about this. I meeting you years and years and years ago. And I want to say you might have been at Seminole. Would that have been correct?
That is
as
correct.
A junior coach? Yeah, how about that? I wonder how many years ago. That's got to be probably 20, 25 years ago. But, I've always watched your career, and I think where I really kind of paid attention more, and probably everybody did, was when you got to Little Rock. And, that run you had with that team was really special. But that didn't define you as a coach, because you had already been a really good coach. It was just that maybe now people are paying attention a little bit more. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it is what it is. It's March Madness. It's TV games. It's Division I basketball. It's the spotlight that we all crave to get to. Our Little Rock team was special for a lot of reasons. At the time, it was the best team in conference history as well. I think in recent years, James Madison had a really good Sun Belt team that might have won one more game. We had 30 wins going into the tournament. The first thing about that team that isn't talked about enough is who we followed. We followed Steve Shields. And Steve, in my opinion, is not a good coach. He's a great coach. So we walked into a situation where we inherited 2 all-conference players. We inherited a defensive culture. We inherited, just a program that had been run the right way. And so when I think back on my journey from time to time, I've been blessed in that way, whether it be following Tubby Smith at Texas Tech or Shaka at Texas, certainly Kermit Davis here at Ole Miss. That's the first thing. I try to get our players to understand that too. Show some respect and just some intelligence, some thought that none of us would have the situation we had today if it wasn't for the guys that came before us. But a big part of the Little Rock team, that, by the way, they're putting in the Hall of Fame this fall, which is going to be pretty cool. Kind of makes me feel really old on one end, but it's pretty cool on that end. But that deal wouldn't have happened for us if we wouldn't have benefited from all of Steve Shields' work before us.
Coach, where for you growing up, like at what point, I can remember when I was really little, my dad was a high school coach and a small college coach. Then, obviously became the athletic director at South Alabama. But, I was around it. But for you, was there a time where, in your gut, you were like, man, I want to get into coaching, and maybe what age, or how did that work for you? When did that happen?
Yeah, it's twofold. I think I was the normal kind of kid. I grew up in Irving, Texas, a suburb of Dallas. And I was one of those kids that whatever season it was is what we did. So during baseball, that's all we did. We played wiffle ball at night. We went to the batting cages. We played baseball. We tried to get a pickup game of baseball going on. The posters on my wall were baseball players. Then when basketball hit, it was just a complete flip. I put the glove underneath my bed, and it was just all basketball until the summer when two-a-days started. Then it was football. And I think people ask me all the time, like, when did you fall in love? I think really it was the access to the sport. Because to play football, we always had to at least have 5 people. We had to have an all-time quarterback, and we played 2-on-2 in the street. Baseball, same kind of deal. You could maybe play 2-on-2 wiffle ball, but you really need 6 players at least. But basketball is around junior high time. I understood that I could play one-on-one, with Larry Bird or Magic Johnson in my driveway. If you had 3 buddies, you could play 2-on-2 all night. And if you just had one friend, you could play ones in the driveway. So I think really it was just because the access of playing basketball. I had a goal in my front yard. My dad built it for me. We could go to different parks. And then certainly when coaching started getting in my mind, I was blessed. I know most coaches say this. Everybody kind of loves their high school coach as you look back. But I really did love those two men. I played for two Hall of Fame coaches, Mike Kunstadt in Dallas and Terry Priest in Houston. And second to only my father, those were my role models. Those were the guys that I was always trying to get a compliment from. Those were the guys that I wanted to be growing up. And so I think around junior high time, where I fell in love with basketball, it was the golden age now. We did not have cable television in my house, but we did have WGN. And so I was that Michael Jordan era where I could literally see the Bulls play more than the Dallas Mavericks, who were my team. So it was just a combination of Jordan, basketball exploding, and then really my two role models were my high school coaches.
Chris, it says a lot about you just even in the first couple of minutes of this. You know, you pay a lot of tribute to the guys that helped you along the way, and we've all had them. You know, all of us. We've had people that have extended themselves, and for whatever reason along the way, you know, they believed in us and in you and in me to say, hey, I'm going to give you an opportunity. But when you look back, and you mentioned your high school coaches and your father, but some of the other people for you that you would say, man, this person, boy, I learned a lot from them. They gave me a chance. This one here, who would some of those guys be?
Well, I think certainly when I was in college, Coach Penders gave me an opportunity as an undergrad that I didn't deserve. He just gave me access. He put me to work. With Vic Trilly and Eddie Orn on that staff. Those guys were like father figures to me. Had a lot of fun with Eddie on the weekends before I was probably supposed to. But Coach Penders gave me an opportunity that I didn't deserve, and I'm appreciative to that to this day. My first job was Danny Casper at Incarnate Word College, and that was to me and still is the best GA job in all of basketball because Danny would just put you to work. The first day, the expectations were clear, the job was clear, and there was accountability. I was on the road recruiting. I had a Diamond Shamrock gas card. Could only stay in a hotel if the distance was 8 hours or more. But looking back, although it was very hard at the time, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. A big part of the way we run our program, even today at Ole Miss, is with our graduate managers, and a lot of that comes straight from Danny Casper. And certainly the break that I'm most associated with that I never get tired of talking about, you know, was the opportunity to work for Bob Knight and Pat Knight for 10 years at Texas Tech. And that was just a blessing. You know, I tell the players all the time, opportunity is going to knock for all of us, whether you're the most privileged person or the guy that's starting from the bottom of the ring like myself. You're going to get an opportunity at some point. You just got to be ready for it when it happens. And I was just blessed when Coach Knight gave me an opportunity to come to Texas Tech. When I say Coach Knight, I really mean Pat too, because at that point in Coach's career, Pat was doing so much on a daily basis in that program. But those two guys, they gave me an opportunity when I didn't deserve it, and I do think I took advantage of it.
You know, Coach, you know, I was around Coach Knight a number of times. You know, I was at UCLA. We played, you know, obviously Indiana. One year we beat him in the Hall of Fame, the opening game of the season in Springfield. Then we had to play him in the Elite Eight, and they just spanked our butts like it was, you know. But talk about some of the lessons, you know, maybe, or some of the things you pulled away, because, you know, a lot of people in the public, you know all this, you've heard this 1,000 times. You know, they watched him, you know, they saw this volatile guy, you know, and, you know, that's kind of the public's perception. But when you really get to know him, like when I was at ESPN working, he was so good, like so good to me and so generous. But as far as his coaching and how he ran a program, talk about some of the things that you really pulled out of that for yourself.
Yeah, it's another one of those questions I've actually really thought about, because I get asked it from time to time. I like to talk to my daughters as they're getting older about Coach Knight and all the things I learned. So I've really, in my mind, tried to kind of narrow it down. I'll give you two. This first one I don't know if I've ever told it publicly. When I was at Seminole Junior College, Coach, he came down a couple times. We had some good players. I had some connections with him, with Jerry Mullen, who was running the junior college service at that time, a great coach himself. And then Mike Kunstadt, my high school coach, was running the recruiting service in Texas. So there were some connectors between me and Coach. The second time Coach came down, it was before 9/11. And so the airport security was a little different. And I gave Coach a ride from Seminole to the Oklahoma City airport. He was flying Southwest. And I'd stayed up all night the night before with just kind of the courage that I was going to ask Coach if there was any way possible that he would consider me being on his staff in any capacity. And so I had rehearsed it all night, how I was going to ask the question. And, I was never a guy that was afraid to talk, but I wanted to be respectful. And I knew I had to be efficient with Coach. I was going to have about 10 seconds to get my point across. We pulled up to the airport in Oklahoma City, and I was going to drop him off. And he said, "Hey, Chris, why don't you just come on in here? I'll grab a slice of pizza with you while I'm waiting on the Southwest flight." And before 9/11, of course, no security. I was able to go right up to the gate with him. We got a piece of pepperoni pizza. I remember it was like it yesterday because Coach was not the cleanest eater. He would always end up with something on his sweater. We're right there at the gate. Coach has a piece of pepperoni pizza, and he had a soda. And I was sitting there, and I'd kind of finally worked up the courage. And at the appropriate time, basically, I timed it perfectly where Coach had a bite of pizza in his mouth. So I knew I had about 10 seconds to talk. And I simply stated, I just said, "Coach, look, I know you'll have every option in the world who you hire on your next staff, but I just want to let you know that in any capacity, any role, I'll come volunteer. I would do anything. And what I can say is I will work extremely hard. No one will outwork me." And at that time, I remember Coach kind of paused a little bit and wiped his mouth, and he said something that I'll never forget that I share to this day with our staff and our players. He said, "Chris, I've never been concerned about this whole deal of work ethic, and people talk about I work hard or I'm first to the office." He goes, "To me, that's a given. The only way to win is if you work hard." He goes, "I'm much more concerned about guys that can get things done. There's a difference between working hard and getting things done." And he said that, and it was one of those deals that I did not have to write in my tablet. I didn't have to go home and tell somebody, it's been right here, and it's been there for over 30 years now. So, and that's still some of our philosophy today. I'm not an office hour guy. I don't tell the players they got to shoot in the morning or at night. But what we do tell everybody in our organization is we got to get something done. The second thing with Coach, I think above all, was just the idea of preparation. I think when I had been a head coach previously at Fort Scott and Seminole, I do believe that we coached hard and well, and I think we did a lot of things right. But I don't think we ever embraced the idea of preparation quite like I learned from Coach. Not only about the next opponent, but also preparing your team each day to practice, your players each day to get better, your staff each day to get better. But to this day, we feel like in our program, preparation is a weapon. We feel like if we have time to prepare, that we can be successful. And that's straight from Coach Knight. That's Bob Knight 101. The will to prepare is stronger than the will to win.
Chris, would you say too, and I'm sure for you it's one of your strengths as a coach, but even with Bobby Knight, I look back and I got to know a lot of the guys that played for him over the years. I've met a ton of them. And the respect they had for him, but not just as a basketball coach, but there was kind of a love. There was they admired him and they kind of revered him. And, for you having spent that many years with him and now you're carving your own path and you've done this amazing job. But I'm guessing for you, that's part of who you are too, diving into those kids and your guys and your relationships and because when I watch your teams play, and I've watched them now for years, I see some of that, where the players respond. You can tell there's something more there than just coach player. And talk a little bit about that for me, because I think, in my view, if I were to tell people what some of your strengths are, I would say that's what they are. Do you think some of that with Coach Knight? And I mean, before Coach Knight, you've coached for years and years and years, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in today's buzzword, it's relationship coaching. And to me, one of the most misunderstood coaches ever was Coach Knight. He was all about relationships. Now, it was a different kind of relationship. It was more father-son than friend. But his relationships were based on discipline, the biggest form of love I think you can give a player. clear expectations, accountability, and above all, probably trust. If coach told you something, it was going to get done, period. There was never a gray area in what he told you and what happened. And I think obviously it was a different kind of relationship that many of us coaches have, myself included today. Coach wasn't going to bring a guy in the office on Thursday and ask him, what are you doing this weekend? But it was a different kind of relationship. It was built on trust. The players knew that he had their back. They knew he was never going to lie to them, ever. They knew that no one in that locker room had a special deal or a special circumstance. It was a true locker room. And I think that's probably one of the things I learned from Coach more than anything, as well as all the other great people I've worked for and with. It's misunderstood. I think the biggest thing with Coach is he was not a self-promoter, and period. So many times over the years, I would personally see him, call Marianne, his assistant, into the office, pull out the old checkbook and write a check to a charity or write a check to a former player's cause or something like that. But he defied. He did not want any credit. It's like, today's world on social media, it's like we all do this. You give a kid a scholarship and you put it on social media that you brought him in. It's this big moment. That was everything that Coach was not for. Right. And I think in return, the world didn't get to see what kind of caring man he really was. But I think it is my responsibility, and those of us that love Coach and worked for him and with him, I kind of think that's my responsibility the rest of my life, that when given a chance, I tell the true side of Bob Knight that many people don't know.
I'd love that, Coach. Talk to me a little bit about, you had been an assistant at Texas Tech, which, by the way, let me just pause for a minute. When I was scouting for the Mavericks, I scouted for them about a year and a half. I remember walking in that arena, and I was blown away. I was blown away first of all, how beautiful the arena is, how amazing it is. But you talk about fan support now, like, wow. That was off the charts. But, for you then to come back there, talk about the feeling you had to be then the head coach, where you had been the assistant for a number of years before. How'd that feel for you?
Yeah, I think above all, it was personal, because I had spent 10 years of my life there. So I knew a lot of the people. I knew the mentality, and above all, I knew the challenge. At the time that we took over, Texas Tech had never won the Big 12 conference. There had only been one Sweet 16 in school history, with James Dickey taking a really good team there earlier in his career. So I knew the challenge. I knew the opportunity. I knew how difficult it was going to be, but I had a belief that it could be done. And so it was a real team effort. It wasn't me. It wasn't one or two players. It was a lot of people. It was administration. It was coaching staffs. We had a lot of assistant coaches during that time. I think on our team that played on Monday night, every assistant coach on that staff got a chance to be a head coach coming after that Final Four run. A lot of great players along the way. But it was a real team effort. When I think back of what we built at Texas Tech, and what I'm most proud of really is that it's sustained. Grant McCaslin, who's there now, who's a friend, and I don't use that word lightly. I have a lot of respect for Grant. We don't vacation together. We've never drank a 12-pack on the lake together, but he is a friend. I respect his journey. But I think the fact that program is sustained and continued to be nationally good, I take a lot of pride in that personally. But above all, I take a lot of pride because I know that all of our players, those guys that played in those 5 years we were there, when we really went from bottom to top quickly, those players put a lot of work in. So it's really satisfying to all of us that the program sustained. Nobody roots harder for Grant than we do on game night, and I can promise you that.
Mm-hmm. Coach, for you, and I look back and, I had a lot of great wins, great teams, it was a lot of fun, but then there were some tough ones too, like tough losses, but we got to the Elite Eight at Alabama. It was my dream to get them to the Final Four, and we came up one game short, way back when, but, for you to get to that title game there, and let me just say this too, when I was in the ACC, I used to have nightmares at times. Sometimes we played Tony Bennett's teams. I would say to myself, God, I hope we score a basket. I hope we can get 2 points tonight, because they were that good defensively. He was the master of kind of the way they played. They really did a good job. But for you, to get to that point, you were right there. You're knocking on the door. phenomenal accomplishment, but then you got to play that team. They're just different than everybody else in the country. Talk about that a little bit and kind of that experience you had there.
Yeah, it was a special game. I thought it was the best two defenses in college basketball that year. We had a lot of respect for Coach's program. Mark Adams on our staff actually had been talking to Coach's dad throughout the season, kind of about the two defenses. Then it was kind of just like, a crazy coincidence that we ended up playing each other. So we had some familiarity with what they were trying to do going into that game, as they did us. I remember it vividly. I thought if we could get to 65 points in regulation, we could win the national championship. Baskets were very hard to get, especially early. Like most coaches, I'm sure you too, Coach, we always had kind of a different layered offensive game plan. We had a way we wanted to start the game, and we had some ways that we could go to. By the second media timeout, I was already on the backside of my card. We were in dribble weave, dribble handoff at the 8-minute mark, just trying to get a shot. But that was a great game. Obviously an overtime game. Literally one of those games where I remember telling the players after the game, I don't remember a lot about that painful experience of the game ending. But I do remember that 2-mile walk from the floor to the locker room, because in those championship games, you're obviously in a football arena.
Yeah.
I remember the golf cart came by to offer us a ride, but I've been telling the players all week at the Final Four that, hey, we're street dogs. We're not taking the golf cart. You can walk your ass to the locker room just like I can walk my ass to the floor. So I turned down the golf cart ride that night. I was walking back to the locker room. I had my 3 daughters with me, and I was really preparing for what I thought was maybe the toughest address of a team that I would ever have. And what I told the team that night is I say, hey guys, the newspapers tomorrow might put it in a different terms, but I don't think we lost this game tonight. I really think we ran out of time. And to me as a coach, I want to thank you for that. It's always a dream to coach a team where you knew you were never going to lose. And so that night came down to the last play of the game, basically in regulation, the last couple of plays in overtime. But the other thing too is none of us like getting beat, but you damn sure don't like losing to somebody you don't respect. And so that handshake with Tony, remembering that the year before they had been the 116 that got beat, they were kind of a magical team. So not that it made it any easier, but I can honestly say that I was happy for him. I really was. Now, my deal is with how many X amount of years I have left, we got to get back there. That's the goal. I think about it every day. We just got to get back there at some point and see if the ball can't roll our way.
Yeah, I think you will, Coach. You're going to get there. Talk about the emotional pull for you when you're at Texas Tech. You'd invested a lot of years into Texas Tech and in Lubbock, and then here comes University of Texas, and they want to hire you because, again, people. I've always said this, that fans, they're wonderful and they love your they support us, but they don't get it. They don't really understand. You're talking about that emotional pull, but then talk about that for you and a little bit about how you made that decision and kind of what went into it for you.
Yeah, it's an easy one to describe, and I've tried to do it before, and people always kind of twist your words. But to me, I tell the players all the time, you've got to be who you are. You got to be yourself. You can learn from others, you can grow, but at the end of the day, you got to be you. And I think, after many years in life, I discovered kind of who I am, and I'm a guy that's very competitive, and I'm a guy that's always looking for the next challenge, not necessarily the next job, but the next challenge. I was proud of what we had built at Texas Tech, not only the 5 years as a head coach, but the 10 as an assistant. And to me, it was just the next opportunity. It was nothing to do with Texas Tech, what Texas Tech had or didn't have. Had a great athletic director, had great donors, had great players. And I know for some it might be difficult to understand. It was the next challenge. It was the next opportunity. And I can only speak for myself. We're all wired different as human beings. But for me, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm at peace with kind of who I am. I am a competitor. I love a challenge. I love doing things that have never been done before. It's kind of what gets me up in the morning. And so knowing that we had the Texas Tech program in a much better place than it was when we got there, and knowing that a chance to go to Austin would be the ultimate challenge. It was that simple. It was never a negotiation between two schools. It was never about anything other than, you know what, I don't know. I got X amount of years in life. I know how I'm wired. This challenge here is going to be very difficult. I want to try that.
Yep. Coach, and I've got great respect for. Here's what I like too, and it's happened to a lot of us too. But when we kind of stub our toe here and there, and they made a decision to let you go, and that happens in sports all the time. But what I've admired about you is how you rebounded. You dug in. You responded in a positive way. You took a situation, and here you are at Ole Miss. But just talk about the lessons you learned a little bit, because we all get punched in the gut. I've been punched in the gut a couple of times in coaching. It's public. It's tough. It's hard. But you responded in such a good way. And talk a little bit about that, and kind of how you got your feet back underneath you and got your career going again. And here you are in the SEC and doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah, that was a tough 60 days. That was by far second to maybe losing my own father a couple years ago. The toughest adversity that I faced in life. And I think during that time, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of listening and reaching out to people that I respect. At the end of the day, it ended up being a pretty simple equation. It's like I've tried to live my life, although I'm not perfect, with this whole idea that, you got to overcome adversity. That tough times are coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think at the core of that whole deal, it's like, I have tried to teach and influence players, my daughters, people that I love my whole life, and like, hey, you got to get back up. You got to get off the dirt, and you got to get back to work. And so at the core of that, there was a lot of people that helped me along the way. One person that I say was right there in my foxhole, Tim Floyd, a great friend, a great coaching mentor of mine. He kept it so simple. He's like, Chris, basically you got to, if what you've been preaching all these years is true, then you've got to practice it yourself. And so although there were some complicated things to go through during that tough time, it was pretty simple. I can sit around and I can play victim mode, or I can understand that life isn't fair. Life isn't easy. I'm not the first person. I'm not the last person that's going to go through kind of some ultimate adversity. Let's get back to work. And so that's kind of what I did. And I basically kind of followed my own advice that I've been trying to teach to players and staff members my whole career.
Tim's one of the best. Tim Floyd, one of the best. Good friend of mine, too. He's one of the best guys and coaches maybe we've all had. But, I look around, Chris, and, I had Bruce Pearl on, and Bruce, made a mistake, and then, Rick Pitino, and I've had a lot of guys, and it's part of life. But I think for you, the great example is to your players that you got back up and got going. And I remember for me, I had put my foot in a bear trap at Alabama, and, I didn't even want to walk out of my house for a while. And then you kind of get yourself going. And, hey, again, just like what I've been teaching my players, my children, all of it, I'm going to put myself back on the saddle. I'm going to go coach. And I was lucky enough to go to the ACC. But for you, in my view, it tells me a lot about who you are, as a person. So congratulations to that. So talk about Ole Miss. Talk about, and I'm familiar now. It was a different era. But like we talked about, as a player at Alabama, I played in the old Tad Pad there at Ole Miss. And matter of fact, I got recruited by Bob Wetlick to Ole Miss. I took an official visit in 1981. We sat there, and matter of fact, he kicked two guys off the bus. They played Georgia. I went during the season. Anyway, they got beat by Georgia. The next morning, they were taking off somewhere. And he pulled two guys off the bus and told them they're not going on a road trip. But I can remember being in Ole Miss then. I played there. And then for 11 years, I coached there every year. But I've always looked at Ole Miss as one of the tough jobs in that league. And, sometimes you don't have the resources as some of the other schools and maybe the tradition or history. But for you, talk about just maybe your mindset. Man, this is an opportunity. What's going through your mind when you got an opportunity to go to Ole Miss?
Yeah, easy to talk about. It's going to sound like some coaching speak, but hopefully, we're going into year 3 now. We've turned down some opportunities to maybe not be here, but this is exactly where we want to be. So hopefully when I say things like I'm about to say, there's some merit to them. There's some bone behind it. This is the best job I've ever had. Now I have always felt that way. You know, when I was a graduate assistant in Incarnate Word, I thought it was the best job I've ever had. So that's no different. But I think to kind of put it in simple terms, I really believe in this place. I get up every day and I believe in what we're doing. Our Chancellor, Chancellor Boyce, is a former coach. He was a college athlete. He's a high school football coach that won a state championship. He came to school at Ole Miss. He'd never been to Mississippi. He's never left Mississippi. He's a chancellor that supports athletics. He's a friend. Keith Carter, you can't make this up. Not only is he a basketball player, he was an All-American. He played at Ole Miss. It's just something special. Now, I've had great ADs along the way. I've been extremely blessed. But there's just something different about having Keith. The walk from the locker room to the press conference, it's a different walk with Keith because this guy knows as much about basketball as I do. So those two guys that I work for and with, certainly timing is everything in life, and the timing of name, image, and likeness and the players being compensated now. Ole Miss was ahead of the time. I think the first collective, Walker Jones here, an elite human being, an elite businessman with great athletics history. The combination of Walker working for the administration, it's just the right time to be at Ole Miss. What's happening with other sports? I'm a huge football guy. The way I've always evaluated some coaching jobs is how's football doing? Because I know as basketball people, you can have no better friend, no better ally than a successful football program, period. What Lane is doing here in football is real. It's not a one-hit wonder. It's been sustained. It's a college football program. The other sports are thriving. The university is growing. Me personally, I think the older I've gotten and learned myself more and more, I think it's accurate to say that I love being in a college town. I'm a guy that, all I need is three options on where to eat, 2 options on where to grab a cocktail from time to time. I don't need a million friends. I just need a few. I love living in Oxford. And I know it sounds like I'm a commercial and I'm recruiting, but I'm really not. And I'm at a place in my life right now where I don't have to shy away from how I feel. I believe in this place. I like it here. You mentioned the underdog feel. I don't shy from that. I mean, of course, you go to Kentucky, they got some more banners. They got some more players retired. We understand that. But to me, this, again, gets back to kind of my DNA and the challenge. I tell the players in recruiting, there's a lot of places where you can go be a part of history. There's nothing wrong with that. I can only imagine being recruited by North Carolina and UCLA. I get it. But there's only a few places where you can go make history. And I think there's a difference between being part of something and making something. And that's what we're doing. In just our second season, a Sweet 16 run, arguably the best team in school history, at least tied with one other special team that was here a few years back. So I like that. It's kind of what motivates me. And again, I don't know if that's my ego. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I know that's how I'm wired. And I always tell the players, you got to know who you are. And I feel like, especially now, much more than 10 years ago, I know who I am. I like being the underdog. I like the idea of let's see if we can get Ole Miss to a Final Four. I know it's not, probable, but it's damn sure possible. We did it before at Texas Tech where it wasn't probable. So I don't know. Maybe I'm Captain Positive. Maybe I'm delusional. But I think if we keep getting good players, we keep selling out games, we keep a chancellor and an AD that understand what's going on here. We keep a fundraising effort to change with the times of name, image, and likeness. I don't see any reason. I always talk about why not. Instead of why are we, why not? Why can't we do it here at Ole Miss? And I can't come up with any reason why we can't. We fight tradition a little bit. We got to get some players in the NBA draft. I believe on this year's team, we have some guys that have a chance. That would be a big step for us. I do believe last year Matt Morrell would have been drafted if he wouldn't have been injured all year. I don't know, Coach. We'll see. I think it's possible. I really do.
when I look at it from a distance, Chris, you look at your background and you had to fight your way, and you weren't handed a silver spoon anywhere along the way. There was not one place. I got to start at UCLA. That was my first job. And, even though I was a graduate assistant, I was able to elevate up and, become, one of the 2 or 3, main assistant coaches, and we won a national championship. So I had a different path. But you've kind of had to, that scratch and claw. You've kind of been the underdog your whole way. So, like, when I look at, and I've told other people this, I said, for right now at this period, it's like a perfect marriage. Because I think Ole Miss needs that. Ole Miss doesn't have that. They've had good teams and good coaches, and they've had a lot of good things happening. But so I see that as kind of a good match, because I think you're going to put your hard hat on. You're going to go to work. You're going to develop guys. You're going to find those players that want to be good, that maybe they're not the 5-star top 20 guy in America, that type guy, but. So I look at it for you right now. I'm excited for you because I think it's a match. Would you, kind of thinking back over your career, would that resonate or make sense a little bit for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like we tell players, you got to find a fit. To me, this recruiting deal, they make it a lot more difficult than it is. Like, if I was a top player or prospect, where do I fit? Like, to me, it's not hard. Style of play, player development, coaching style, where I want to live. Same thing with coaches. I think sometimes, you can get a great coach, and he's probably at the wrong job. We've seen that a million times. And then sometimes I think special happens where you get the right coaching staff, not just me, our whole staff. We fit Oxford right now, and Oxford fits us, and so it's special. I think another thing about this timing deal, Coach, this one's crazy. You think about the tradition, the history. We also really benefit from how strong the SEC is right now. Because this is a crazy one. I know you're a basketball guy. Take a quick Google through this. I would tell you that the job Andy Kennedy did here at Ole Miss was damn near a Hall of Fame entry. It's crazy, Coach. You look back.
I say it all the time.
It's not in some of these athletic directors. I know he's got a great job right now at UAB, but if I'm an AD, one of the first guys, all Andy Kennedy is win wherever he's ever been. And you look back at his tenure here, it's not 20-win seasons, Coach. It's 22, 23, 24. But in a lot of those years, the league was getting 2-3 teams in the SEC in the NCAA tournament. And so, I think the tradition here, it's sneaky, but it's here. I would argue that the job AK did here was, if he had those same teams and that same run in today's current SEC, where multiple teams get in the tournament, AK might be at North Carolina right now wearing the light blue $2,000 suit, country club membership at 3 different spots. So I think timing is everything. I'm an example of that. Everybody is. But AK, I don't know, man. First thing I got to do is I got to get him in the Hall of Fame here at Ole Miss.
Yeah,
I will get that done, or I will die trying. But the job he did here, it's just crazy if you look at it on paper. It's crazy.
Yeah. Chris, I used to say too when I coached there, and I looked around and you had Nolan Richardson, Tubby Smith, Cliff Ellis was at Auburn, Billy Donovan, John Brady, Stansberry obviously at Mississippi State, Rod Barnes, who had done a fabulous job at Ole Miss, magnificent job at Ole Miss. And you can go through the whole league. And then there was a period, I thought, where a lot of that crowd of coaches left, and there was a period where I don't know that the coaching was as great. I'm not trying to be critical. But then here comes this next wave, like right now. You look through the coaches in your league and the success that's they've had in your league right now, like just now, top to bottom, everybody in that league, you're talking about some Hall of Famers now. You're talking about guys that really know how to coach. And so the league, in my opinion, it just keeps rising because of the coaches. What Nate's doing at Alabama, what Bruce is doing at Auburn. You can go on and on and on through the whole league like that. Rick Barnes at Tennessee and the job and the consistency they've had to be at the level they've had. So the league right now, you're in it. Like you're in it right now. And I think the league is the coaching in the league is as good as there is anywhere in the country.
It's a lot of fun. It's a gauntlet. The young guy in the league, he just went and won the national championship this year. So, no, it's a lot of fun. I remind myself of that too. Some of it, I think some of it might be me. I can take credit for it because it seems wherever I go, that's the case. Like when we're in the Big 12, I got Bill Self and Lon Kruger and Bruce Weber and Eddie Sutton. And so it's like, I know no different. It just seems like wherever we show up. So, but no, it's an opportunity. It's hard to kind of look ahead. This time of year, I lose a little bit of sleep. Like we just recently came out with the schedule, and I have not looked at it. I promise you, I haven't even looked at it. I know we got 2 of our first 4 at home. That's all I know. But I can't even look at it, Coach, till probably about midway through official practice in October is the first time I'll look at it. But it's a lot of fun. At the end of the day, people say it's a challenge or it's tough. We all got into this to try to be the best we could. So in this league, the opportunity every night to go play somebody that you're kind of scared to death of, really, it's a lot of fun.
When I was in the ACC and I'm looking at Roy, Mike, Patino, Boeheim, Tony Bennett, but I think that league, I'm not trying to be critical, but it shifted over into your league. I think you guys, that league's top to bottom the best. Coach, let me ask you this one. I think you got a lot of years left in you. I think you're going to win a national championship. I believe it. But when it's all said and done, and I've asked some other coaches this question, and I'm not coaching right now, and I had a great run for 35 years. But if you could it doesn't always work this way too, because we try our best as coaches. We try. But if you look back and you say, man, the thing I enjoy the most, or what I wish the lessons my players would take from me, or maybe in general, the things you enjoy or what legacy you want to have, what would those things be for you? But I think you got a lot of years left. I'm not trying to paint a picture that it's coming to an end, because I think you got a lot of years. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's all about the players. Hopefully those guys, look back one day and say, hey, Coach never lied to me. He told me on the front end it wasn't going to be easy. I'm a better man having gone through it. He taught me how to win, not just on the scoreboard, but kind of in life, setting something up. What do you want? What are you willing to do to get it? And most importantly, what is your plan to go execute and get it? I've coached long enough now where I'm starting to get some of those awesome moments, former players coming back, pros retiring, starting to get into life after basketball. Some of our players, actually, they've got sons growing up. Haven't quite coached one of those guys yet, but getting close. And then I really put all the staff members into that too, like the relationship we had with the young GAs, some of the assistant coaches along the way. But to me, it'll be all about relationships, just thinking back, remembering all the tough times, the stories. Me personally, I don't think I'm going to be a beach house or lake house guy, although I respect that. I'm not a real golfer, nothing like that. I'd like to coach until I can't coach anymore. One thing, I love the game of football, and I just wonder maybe one day if one of my buddies coaching like FBS football or something might put me on the staff and give me like just one job, like maybe just kickoff team, just one job. Give me one job. Let me learn it. Let me become an expert on it. I went out to football practice today and saw Pete and Lane and those guys practice. And I don't know, that always interests me, man. Like, today is like 110 degrees out there and all the football coaches have sweats and hoodies on and stuff. And the way they talk to their players is the way that, it's the way we talk to our players, but it's the way that most basketball coaches wish they could. So that's kind of a sneaky dream there. But is there any way I could be on a college football staff one day and just give me one role, like just one job? Like, I don't have time to learn the whole thing, but I think if you just gave me one job, I think I could excel in it.
That's too good, Coach. All right, here's the last one I'm going to ask you. So I'm a young coach, and man, I want to get into it, or I want to get into college coaching, and I come to you and say, Coach Beard, man, I just really want to be great. I want to be like you one day. What would you tell, or what do you tell? What advice do you give those young people that want to eventually sit in your seat one day?
Yeah, a couple things. Me personally, I believe in. I don't believe in email I don't believe in text message. I don't even really believe in a phone call, although sometimes if you can get a phone call with somebody, you take advantage of that. I believe in old school face-to-face. I don't think there's any coach in the country, whether it's Bill Self or Rick Pitino. I think if a young coach showed up, now look, you might have to show up and stay a couple days. You might have to stay a couple weeks. But I believe that most coaches are coaches. And I believe that most coaches are going to try to help the guy. And again, sometimes you have to knock on a door for a long, long time to get in. But I just encourage our guys or guys that reach out to me, like, can you get face-to-face with somebody? So, some of the old things, Coach, like basketball camps still exist. Nobody ever talk about it, but we do 2 weeks of camp here, and I never tell anybody no. Anybody that ever wants to come work our camp gets told yes. I think the ability to go to practices, to go to games, just to show up and find people. I know in my journey I did that. My first head coaching job, Fort Scott Community College, the AD was Kevin Gundy. He was the football coach. I called him. I was just begging for a chance to talk to him. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I could hear Coach. He kind of put the phone down, and he was checking his schedule the next day with his secretary. And I heard something about racquetball tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Coach got back on the phone and said, Chris, maybe sometime around 9 a.m. tomorrow would be a good time to call me. I remember it like it was yesterday. I got in my car in Denton, Texas. I was coaching at North Texas at the time. I was an assistant. I got Vic Trilly, my head coach's permission to go, and Vic was like me, like you, Coach. He's a grinder. Vic's like, man, go get it. I got in my car, old school Rand McNally map, no GPS. I drove all night to Fort Scott, Kansas. I took a shower at the Buck Run Rec Center. Their old ladies were doing aerobics in there. I went to the men's restroom, took an army bath. I went to Fort Scott Community College. I'd never been there before. There was no internet. I couldn't find a map or anything. When I got there was only 3 buildings. I figured there had to be a racquetball court somewhere. I found the racquetball court inside Arnold Arena. The door was shut. They had not one of those little glass things, so all it was a door. So I'm just banking that Coach Gundy's in there. The ball stopped around 7:30. Kevin Gundy walked out. I introduced myself. I don't want to speak for Coach Gundy, but I feel like 2 hours later I had my first head coaching job. So I still believe in relationships. I still believe in getting face-to-face. And sometimes I hear a young coach say, well, I can't get to know Bill Self. I disagree. I think if any high school coach or any college graduate or anybody that's wanting to get in coaching, I bet if you went to Lawrence, Kansas, and you went to the coach's parking lot, Self probably has the nicest car there. Knowing Coach is probably an Escalade or Mercedes or something like that. I bet if you just stood there and kept your ass right by that car, he might tell you no for a couple days. But I'm very confident that if you stood there long enough, Self would probably be like, hey, come in here. What do you want? But that's the way I still think this business works. I think you get to know people and you work, you keep knocking on that door, and eventually that door will knock down. That's what I think.
I love it, Coach. That's a great answer. My first day at UCLA as a graduate assistant, I asked Jim Herrick, I said, what would you like me to do? And he looked right at me and said, if I have to tell you what to do every day, I hired the wrong guy. And so I learned right then, I'm diving in wherever I can. I don't care if I got to drive somebody somewhere or take the mail down to the post office. I'm just going to go to work. So anyway, man, Chris, this was great stuff. And I've told you before, man, I'm rooting for you. I'm pulling for you, man. I've been a big fan. And so anyway, man, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great. And best of luck to you this year and all the years to come. So thank you, Chris, so much.
Thank you, Coach. Much respect.